You got into the safety business because you wanted to protect people, but somewhere along the way, the job started controlling your time, your schedule, your priorities, even your income potential. What if the expertise you've built over the years in the field can give you something more? More freedom, more control, more ownership of your future. I'm Sheldon Primus, the author of 7 Steps to Starting a Profitable Safety Consulting Business and the host of the Safety Consultant Podcast, with more than 350 episodes helping safety professionals become consultants and grow their career. Consulting changed my life. In fact, I'm a full-time RVer, and one consulting contract paid for my home I live in today. Now, I help safety professionals build their own consulting practice through bi-weekly coaching calls, accountability, and personal guidance. But this program isn't for everyone. Start with the Consultant Readiness Audit at sheldon.coach.
What if everything we thought we knew about safety was just interference? From the host of the Rated R Safety Show and the founder of Safety FM comes the complete Signal Transmission Trilogy, now available in one powerful edition. Safety, in my opinion, the book that started the conversation. Safety Mutation, where the boundaries of culture, systems, and belief begin to break. And now, Safety Transmission, the final piece of the signal. For the first time, all 3 books are together in one volume. The Signal Transmission Trilogy, Complete Edition. This isn't just about compliance. It's about consciousness. It's about decoding the way we think, lead, and live, inside and outside the system. Whether you've been following the signal since the beginning or you're just now tuning in, this is the version to own. Search Signal Trilogy on Amazon or visit safetyfm.com to get your copy now.
This show is brought to you by Safety FM.
Warning, the following broadcast contains adult language, adult content, frank safety discussions, and stories that might sound unbelievable. But believe me, every one of those stories is true. We didn't start the safety war, but we are going to fight to win it. For our families, for our communities, for our workplaces, and for our lives.
How's everybody doing there? I had spent the day in New York City. It seems like a lot of people, by the way, thanks for bearing with me. Seems like a lot of people took the day off today. Unlike next week, we have the UN General Assembly going down off the traffic. Putting all that extra carbon in the air. They should be ashamed of themselves. Hope everybody had a great weekend. What's going on here? We just made the reservations, in case you haven't heard of it, on some of the other shows. If you go on over to safetyfm.com, let's see if I can do a share screen on this. Okay, we're going to do share a screen. I'm sorry for you folks at home that are listening on our audio feed on Safety FM, but let me go on over here. So you go over to safetyfm.com, and this is the website for the network. And you go over to live event.
And here we have the Conklin Conference, starring Todd Conklin, hosted by Jay Allen. Two of our safety mystics is here, Todd Conklin and Jay Allen, along with Jen Long, Bob Edwards, and Mark Yeston. This is on September 27th to 29th, 2023, and you could go down and uh, take a look at it. And there's also Jay just sent me a text message, ACFS event there the day before, all at the same venue, all at the same hotel. Uh, there is a cost associated to both. It's definitely not free. So we're hanging out down there doing talking safety, what we always do. So today marks the 22nd anniversary, a very solemn anniversary for anybody in the New York area for 9/11, for the attacks on 9/11. Where, I can't believe, I really cannot believe that it is 22 years. And I know I'm not the only one who said that. And it's not all about me. I mean, this is definitely not about me, not about the program or anything else. This is about, we want to go and remember a lot of the folks, remember the folks that died on this day, 3,000. And I looked up some other, I'm putting on the feed here to make sure you hear me all. I just did some back in the envelope. Yeah, we got it here. Back in the envelope information here. There are almost 3,000 people that died in related with 9/11 related cancers since then. And we had the original attack on the World Trade Center in the early 90s. No, where was I? I was listening to 99.1 Pacifica Radio out of New York City. Yes, I do listen to the Pacifica Radio from time to time. I believe it was the Amy Goodman show or the show before Amy Goodman there. And there was a report that, and I was living in Hoboken, New Jersey at the time, there was a report that a small plane crash had hit the World Trade Center. There was a small plane. And I was thinking, this sounds like the situation around World War II, 1940s, 1950s, where a bomber hit the Empire State Building. I said, wow, that happened again. And then I said, well, let me turn on the TV. Let's see what this is. I turned on the TV. And that was when the second plane came in and did the damage. So me and the people in the apartment house where I was living on Grand Street in Hoboken, New Jersey, we went to the roof and we went out and we saw the whole thing from there on out, what you saw on TV. And then reports from the Pentagon and Flight 93 came in and all other stuff. Thankfully, I did not have anyone that I know, uh, any close associates or anything, die in the attacks there. My How my family was involved was my uncle Kenny, who I believe it was the Merchant Mariners Medal he received from the Department of Transportation. He was one of the people evacuating the Manhattan on his tugboats, and he was his. There was a article that mentioned him a year later at the awards ceremony for all the first responders that responded to the maritime evacuation of Manhattan. Um, that He said, no, it was just one of those things. I mean, it was a horrible situation there. And he got a write up in the New York Times. And then later on, he got that award a second time for Miracle on the Hudson, where he was one of the responders for that. But anyway, it's just horrific what we were dealing with there. And I wanted to start out with, before I go on, I want to start out, I put together a PowerPoint presentation on, and so not, I added, if you're watching the program, you've seen a lot of the elements here on, uh, on, hold on, I'm getting it here. You've seen a lot of these PowerPoint presentations here, and I just wanted to hold on one second here. I said this too early. I put together a presentation on the World Trade Center dust, a lot of the respiratory issues there, because a lot of this stuff, like with the issue attention cycle that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, uh, a lot of this stuff people think were resolved with respiratory protection and disasters. A lot of this stuff wasn't resolved, as evidenced by the COVID-19 situation and our rantings on that. We mentioned a lot of the uh, issues that came up with them. So I want to take a moment of silence here. We're going to play the Star Spangled Banner in memory of everybody who passed away on 9/11, 2001. Horrible situation. We all have a story to tell on 9/11, where we were, what we were doing, how we were doing it, if we responded, especially in the New York area. A lot of this, we thought health and safety wise, a lot of this stuff happened down there. We all understand that during the moment, during the emergency response, things aren't going to be done exactly correctly. And we thought that since 9/11 that that would never happen again, especially with the respiratory protection and how we managed the disaster. But sometime in the late 2000s, this stuff went away, went out of our mind. Think about it. The issue intention cycle, we thought it was resolved. But okay, it was resolved. Now we can move on. And the other thing is that we were dealing with fatigue, just general fatigue, especially up here in the New York area. You could not go for years after 2001 without uh, anywhere. That's people talking about it. People, the biggest shock was to a lot of the people in college, where I went to college, IT, the graduate school, where people were walking zombies, and that's what some of the descriptions were. And they were just in complete shock that something like this could happen. And I don't wanna go and relive all the, details. You can read about them. There's a lot of conspiracy theories behind it. We were gonna know all of them. We had a discussion today in my house over dinner because I felt it was really important to discuss this. And I had mentioned this first, I believe, started the podcast
2021 where we had uh, uh, I gave a message where we stand for our posterity. Got to remember this because today, and like we have a very good school district here. My son came home saying a lot of things that were not necessarily true with 9/11, and as those, 11-year-olds, well, they're not going to believe you totally. One day, it's my hope that he believes me on what happened on that day. Uh, and the facts, I show them, look, these are the facts. What you're learning at school, not necessarily facts from a certain point of view. And it's important for us, whether it's with 9/11, whether it's with the COVID-19 pandemic, anything like that, that we write things down. Because writing things down ensures permanence. Computer stuff and everything that we see, this stuff, not permanent. It's gonna be deleted, it's gonna be erased, it's gonna be thrown out. Writing things down, them, uh, that lasts. The written word lasts. Maybe we talk about hieroglyphics, thanks to the Rosetta Stone. Uniform lasts. Epic of Gilgamesh, thousands of years old. These things are all in writing, and they're a way for the past to communicate with the future. These stories, this oral history that we have, it's very important that we remember this stuff, and we make this part of regular conversation. I know 3 people that were that dealt with PTSD from 9/11. I know them personally. One ended up, and I'm not gonna out them here on the air. One ended up committing suicide, over the whole thing. Years later, he went into a deep depression, which led to other health issues, which led to his eventual suicide or mental health, issues. And what I'm going to say, make sure that, uh, if you're feeling that way, get help. Please get help. Media in the game here. Media here to fight safety. The other 2 people, depression, took it for years, health issues, alcohol abuse, other substance abuse. What my way of managing it was learning about emergency response more. I already knew about emergency response for many years. And right after that, we did the anthrax attacks there. About a year later, they were still doing private cleanups. I got involved in private cleanups after 9/11. Me with my former employer. Uh, all this stuff going on there. It's got to learn this. Gotta remember. The other thing is this: virtue signaling. What's virtue signaling? Oh, look at me. I have the American flag up. Rah, 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 rah. Rah, 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 rah. Oh, look at me. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. And you don't really do anything. We're not talking about the people today that volunteered, that went out there and did community events in honor of the people that passed away on 9/11. We're not talking about the other people out there. I want to give the appearance, right, that they're patriotic. I want to give the appearance, and I know this is controversial, but who am I? A safety shock jock. But there's nothing in there. You cannot just feel, "Hey, rah, rah, I feel okay. I wanna remember these folks." Try to translate that into something. That's what we're gonna do here in a minute. My attempt to translate into something meaningful, right? Part of the reason why we set this up, eventually became Safety Wars, was 9/11. It was rooted in 9/11, where me and a group of people to impact public policy. We were a little bit successful, but we had I not been involved in that, I wouldn't be involved with this right now. There were horror stories associated, we gotta remember, but let me move on here. Ramblings of a lunatic mind here, right? But what else is new? So,
Hold on here. I want to make sure this gets displayed correctly. Yes, we got to do it this way. All right. So here we have my presentation here. All right. Big thing is, and there were articles written in the Synergist and some of the other magazines that we need to have more training in respiratory protection after 9/11. And these articles were written in the late 2000s, early 20, and what were some of the lessons that we learned? This is what it is. Anytime you're dealing with a disaster, 9/11 sit on that scale, personal disaster, and let's remember for review, 4 different things we're worried about. 0 to 20 scenario 1, 0 to 24 hours, scenario 2, 24 to 96 hours, right? A couple of day emergency power outage for a couple of days, that sort of thing. Then you have 1 month, right, where you're dealing with things for up to a month, some normalcy. It takes you through the disaster cycle, and then you have more than 30 days, which is essentially primitive living. Why do I break it down that way? Because those are 4 different things that you totally need to, uh, plan for, there. Now, we're gonna talk about hazardous metals. There are 4 routes of exposure, typically: inhalation, injection, contact, and ingestion. So, rule number 1, dealing with hazardous materials. Don't get it in you, right? Don't get it on you, any contact hazards, spreading it around, and do not bring it home, the most important. So if you can remember that, don't get it in you, don't bring it home. Those are the 3 things you remember on this. We also have, remember our modes of work, especially if you're in hot where every hot person's ends Rasmussen, you have normal work. You're able to set up the work on things, uh, panel of things, right? You're able to set things up, you're able to apply the hierarchy of controls and everything else right there, and you're able to go through the whole thing. And a disaster site work, you can't that doesn't apply. Our skills mode, there is no safe mode in disasters. When you mitigate hazards, you try to apply the hierarchy, obviously. Rules mode. And that's the best you can hope for in the initial response. Meaning, I have this experience, I'm going to apply this experience, I have these procedures, and I'm going to apply the rules, this, then, that. We're good. That's the best you can do. And what do you do that with? With training, tabletop exercise, planning, thinking, the whole thing. Most likely in a disaster site, you're going to be dealing in lack of knowledge mode or in the knowledge, meaning you're going to apply what you learned before and you're going to apply it to this situation. And that's a higher rate, right? And the numbers aren't important, but that's where your highest, that's where you have the problem. With 9/11, there were so many people involved. It was such an urgent situation. That's where the errors were made. So what's the scenario here? Plan. Now, could you have planned for something like that? Hindsight being 2020 and hindsight bias, right? With that, or Monday Night Football being listened to upstairs by my father-in-law, right? Monday morning or Tuesday morning quarterback. We're not playing that game here. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just telling you, looking back, what happened, now we better able to plan for tomorrow and other things. Nobody could envision that someone's gonna take a plane, fly it into the buildings, and make them collapse. No, unless the intelligence community really had some knowledge, there were some indications that the intelligence community had some foreknowledge that got buried in there. I don't know. It's sort of like what we used to call a black swan event. And as everyone knows that black swans do exist in the Southern Hemisphere, but black swan, not gonna happen. Now, going on here, we have hierarchy of controls. We also have left and right of the bang. This was it still works for me. We have the left of the bang, meaning the left of the incident. This comes from the military, and I was never in the military, so you're going to say, what do we deal with? Situational awareness, evaluation, equipment, hierarchy, controls, and all stuff that goes into planning out stuff. Then you have bang, right? You have bang, the incident right of the bang, the incident, the evaluation, and everything else. And what you want to try to do is keep it on the left of the bang, and then when the bang happens, you go right of the bang, and now it's automatic. Our responses are and everything else. This is what training is involved. This is why it's important now on our work. Here's our disaster management cycle. We have a disaster, the response, recovery, mitigation, and then preparation. And what happens is once you get to the recovery and mitigation, hey, the thing's over. This can easily be the issue attention cycle. Everyone thinks that everyone's prepared until the next is. Now let's talk about this here. How does this and this and this all translate into OSHA? How does it apply? We have what are called emergency, where you have to go if you're an employer and you have to go through what the emergency procedures are with this. Quarterly, Morgan Stanley, the person who was in charge there of safety, people were told to go back in. No, no problem. We can't got this. Go back to your office. He said, "Hey, move on out, guys. We're going out," and he evacuated almost all of his people out of the street. That's how the story goes. And I'm sticking with it. I don't mention them here because I've seen like three sources for three different names, so I don't want to have a problem here. So, what is ecology? When we talk about chemical exposure, there's 9/11 dust, or in your workplace or anything else, you have discussed toxicology. This is the thing that a lot of trainers don't want to discuss. But it's real simple. Study of adverse effects of chemicals versus the amount of chemical on the human body. So that's essentially you have what is called dose response relationships. For every dose, there is a response to the body, and the body filters out materials primarily through the liver and the kidneys. Doesn't do it that through your digestive system, things of that nature. It's primarily through the liver and kidney. And these chemicals have a uh, effect on you. They could have, and if you put on, look into the CDC NIOSH guy for chemical hazards. I have it right here. They're supposed to keep on saying they're going to update this. It hasn't happened yet. In September 2007, if you go to table number 5, Roman numeral 5, so where is it? Real table 5. You go, yeah, here it is. You have two complete pages on how chemicals could impact. By the way, this is available online. This is all for free if you right away uh, to the CDC for this. You have 2 pages of what a chemical can do to you here. A lot of stuff. That's something you gotta remember. And let's say you have multiple chemicals, probably that's something you need to think too. Now, who was the guy who came up with this is my little joke, a guy by the name of Paracelsus. But why did they call him Paracelsus? Because his real name was let's see if I can get this, Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. Well, my German grandparents were rolling over their graves with the pronunciation of the last name there. Ways of thinking of things getting into the body, inhalation, we can breathe it in. This was the primary hazard on 9/11, injection, meaning that it gets into your body and through some type of injection. So the common thing that they always just say was needles sticking. But since
no, we get more experience. We understand it could be a hydraulic, high pressure air. It could be a stab, that sort of thing. When I was around 11 years old, I fell out of the rusty nail. My hand got infected, blew up, and everything else. There's the, there's the scar right there. Yes, no, I do not. I'm not saying I have this stigmata. But where it ended up was I fell on a nail, got injected, and my mom freaked. We'll just do that. What's up? Now, chemicals, how do they interact with your body? It could be an additive, meaning accumulates form from different chemicals, and that's what we always assume is the additive and in industrial gas technology dealing with chemical exposure. Then you can have potentiation. One chemical alone does not have an impact, but when added to another, the second one has a greater effect. Antagonist, meaning what chemicals together are less hazardous, and synergy. Hey, someone should name a magazine now. Synergist, where synergistic. Two chemicals together are greater than each separately or added together. And you have a dose response relationship greater than the dose, greater than the response. And of course, for an here, you expect challenges with a thing called hormesis and homeopathy. They give you a little chemical and you get action. So here he goes, and it's healthy and things of that nature. I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV. How does this? And I don't play one on the internet either. Exposure limits. So here we have commonly held exposure limits, and these are normally inhalational, except for LD50, which or LCD, which are lethal dose 50 or lethal concentration 50. So you have the OSHA PPL. That is the regulatory limit. So if OSHA wants to come out there and cite your employer for something, they're going to, generally speaking, go after the permissible exposure limit, unless you're dealing with the 1910-120 regulations where that lowest voltage exposure limit may apply, depending on what you're dealing with and everything else. All right, then you have the NIOSH REL, that's the recommended exposure limit. NIOSH is National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, part of the CDC. They're the people who go and deal with certifying respirators and things of that, and evaluating respirators. They put out this book. Then you have IDLH, immediately dangerous to life and health situation. That's IDLH. Uh, that's usually listed in the NIOSH guide. And we also have, hold on, let me write this down because I'm going to forget it. I always forget. All right. And then you have LD50, lethal dose 50, oral, right? That's usually through animal testing, and LC50, same thing. That means 50% of the people will take 50% to kill a population, and a ceiling level. You can also have a stellar term exposure limit with that. Those are generally the ones there. And you have the units to measure for all this stuff. You have parts per million, real simple, 1 out of 1 million, parts per billion, 1 out of 1 billion. When you're dealing with those, you're normally dealing with an air concentration of a vapor or a gas. That's what you're dealing with. If, however, realize that, especially if you're into professional testimony and witnessing, everything is a weight, a volume. So there is a formula for that we won't go into, but micrograms per meter cubed, right? What's a microgram? That's the same as 1 in 1 billion. Milligram, meter per meter cubed. That's 1 in 1,000 meter cubed. And how much is a gram? 1 gram is 0.0022046 pounds. Now you're going to say, well, what use is that to me as individuals? That is 2 grams of salt, right? A little bit more than 18. Yes, my cat was annoyed because I used her food for this. That is sugar. 2 grams of sugar.
And those are two almonds, 2 grams on that. And yeah, I didn't have them here, but it was like 4 pistachios. Yeah. Now you take this and you divide it in half. Yeah. You got 1 gram. You divide it into 1,000. Let's say you're going to take that. Let's start over. You take that and you put it on a flat surface like a mirror. And you're going to take a razor blade or other sharp object, maybe a exam or a credit card. You're going to divide it into two, right? Yeah. You got 1 gram here, 1 gram there. And you're able to divide that up into 1,000 pieces. Then that is 1 milligram, one of those thousand. And you're going to take that and divide that 1 gram into a million by a million, and you can deal with a microgram. So that's a real small thing. Per meter cube is right 39 inches by 39 inches by 39 inches. So we see a permissible exposure limit of 50 micrograms. That's not a whole hell of a lot. 50 micrograms per meter cube, not a lot. Now it's real simple. You go to the workplace and you're able to go and let's say you have a mixture of chemicals. You have multiple chemicals here. You're going to go and assume it all have the same target organ, right, as listed in the NIOSH guide and on the safety data sheet and on some of the other resources out. They have online apps dealing with this. If you come to go and look that up, you're going to be dealing with a mixture. If they have the same target organ, well, you have to make an adjustment. And this is the typical formula for that. So what's the moral of the story? The more chemicals you have, the lower the exposure to each chemical you're allowed. And as long as you don't this formula doesn't come out to 1, you're good. How's that? That's the additive formula. And where do you find these exposure limits? OSHA regulations. OSHA regulates a couple thousand chemicals. NIOSH, 679 chemicals. ACGIH threshold limit value book. That's the American Conference of Governmental Industrial Hygienists. They have a threshold limit value biological exposure limit book that under 1,000 or private trade group. Safety data sheets and of course scientific literature. That's where you get all this. Common respiratory hazards. This. Now here's my question. This is what the crux is. What the whole idea of this presentation. I should have made a note of that. This is what the entire thing is here. How many chemicals were in World Trade Center dust? Are because every once in a while you hear something that wasn't cleaned up during the initial cleanup. How many do you think? Some sources, all about 2,500 different things. What were they? Let's see. I have the list right here. Bear with me here. This is from the NIH.gov. Uh, let's share our screen here. Hold on. Hold on for a second. Here, this is from the NIH here, non-copyrighted. The World Trade Center Twin Towers in New York City collapsed on 9/11. That's one, converting much of the building's huge mass into dense clouds of particles that settled on the streets and within buildings throughout Lower Manhattan. So most of the stuff is the way the predominant wind direction was. The contamination started about a block and a half, maybe 2 blocks north of the World Trade Center, and went over Brooklyn and extended over Brooklyn. On that, it was uncanny the way things had settled up. So about 80 to 90% of the World Trade Center does, ranging in particle size from approximately 2.5 microns upward. Now, for a review, respiratory, you inhale things, respiratory wise, is less than 10 microns, right? PM 10 microns, less than 10 microns is what gets into your body. Your natural defenses uh, filter that out. So the smaller or the more surface area is another way of thinking. Dust has, the more opportunity for chemical reaction and the deeper it penetrates into your lungs. So it was so ranging in particle size, 2.5 microns upward, was a highly alkaline. Some of the meaning the pH levels were somewhere around 10 or 11, right? Mixture of crushed concrete, gypsum, and synthetic vitreous fibers that were readily resusceptible by physical disturbance of low velocity air currents. Hmm. High concentrations of quartz and superquartz dust were inhaled, depositing in the conductive airways in the head and lungs, and subsequently swallowed. Congestion hazard, causing both physical and chemical irritation to the respiratory and gastroesophageal epithelium. There were both acute and chronic adverse health effects in rescue and recovery workers, cleanup workers, residents, and office workers, especially lacking effective personal respiratory protective equipment. Before 9/11, who would have ever done that? Come on, let's be fair. Context drives behavior. The numerous health effects of these people are not those associated with monitored PM toxins, which are present at low concentrations, that is, asbestos fibers, transition, and heavy metals, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, POS, and diaphragm, stuff with chlorine, right? 234 CBD. This is from the transformers. If you've ever been in a high rise, every floor has a transformer, a step down transformer from high voltage down to what goes out of your outlet, which is usually your left hand shoulder. Attention was never directed at the high concentrations of larger size and highly alkaline World Trade Center dust particles that, in retrospect, contain the more likely causal toxicants. Fortunately, the initial focus on air quality monitoring and guidance on exposure prevention programs on low concentration components was never revived. Now, if you look at some of these other sources I have here, this is from the Scientific American, September 7, 2011. I'm broadcasting. Uh, again, 10 million tons of building materials and contents burning at temperatures above 1,000 degrees Celsius, extended from lower Manhattan across the East River into Brooklyn beyond to the sea. What was in that? Chemicals, a lot of stuff with the same with the same target organ, the lungs, the sinus, the esophageal, right, gastroesophageal epithelium, all that stuff going in there. So now let's go back to our presentation here. What do we have? This. So do you think that there's going to be a lot or a little of material that's going to give you a problem? It's going to be a little material because you have, according to some sources, several hundred thousands of chemicals. OSHA doesn't have exposure limits for all of them. CDC doesn't. ACGIH doesn't. Any of these groups, and it's all being done on the as you're thinking in real time here. Again, not prepared or anything else. How the hell were we going to prepare for that? Right? Blame fixes nothing. Context drives behavior. So what happened afterwards with this stuff was that they had always commended, and a couple of classes came out, free outreach courses for
fast response workers, where we talked about respirators. And there's a huge focus on in those classes, especially the emergency response on PPE, on respirators. Because if we go back here, what doesn't apply? What doesn't apply here is this, the hierarchy of control. So what ends up happening is you have to rely on your PPE, and you also have to rely on a greater safety margin, where a normal safety margin in safety is 2 to 1, meaning if you have a PEL of 1 divided by 1/2, 0.5. Guess what? That is your action level. There's a 2 to 1 safety margin. When you're dealing with slings, what are you doing? A 4 to 1, I think, would be on that safety margin, 5 to 1 safety margin. When you're dealing with a disaster, since you don't know what you're dealing with, now your safety margin has to be a lot higher. Some people say if you're able to quantify that, it would be 10 to 1. You really don't know what's there. That's why it's important to have PPE and be prepared with PPE if you're a responder. So now what do you do if you're the average Joe, the average Jane, the average person there? So first thing you want to do, I left this in here from the previous presentation. All different. You have to know what your hazards are, and in this case, it would be smoke and debris, and that would be the respiratory hazard. And you can have an oxygen deficiency, and unless you're dealing with supplied air, never go into an oxygen deficient atmosphere. What are we talking about? Sewers, tanks. Uh, Here we have a sewer pipe here, drainage pipes for a storm sewer. Hopefully that's sanitary. You have hydrogen sulfide, swamp gas, different hazards for that. What you're going to need all different types of PPE and supplied air respirators. Then you have carbon monoxide. That's a big one on disaster sites where an emergency response with from generators, generally speaking, people put them in areas where there's low ventilation, like and they get carbon monoxide poisoning. Again, you need air monitoring for that. But with wood smoke, these are only some of the things that were in World Trade Center smoke here. This is regular wood smoke. We're not talking World Trade. Regular wood smoke, which was in there, all these chemicals in it, a lot of the same target organs. World Trade Center dust, 50% non-fibrous material and construction debris, 40% glass, 9.2% cellulose, and the rest extremely toxic and carcinogenic. Lead, mercury dioxide, polyaromatic, and we apply that. So I remember my first experience with respiratory hazard emergency response was when I was about 12 years old in New Jersey, just south of the Outer Bridge crossing. And for Amboy, there was a factory, and it blew up. And they had fires. Uh, what did they give the responders? A lot of police officers masks. Dust masks. They'll go out there and all the civil surgical, go out there and do your things. It's okay. And what ended up happening? What ended up happening, people ended up getting sick, and the same thing happened over in Secaucus, New Jersey, and there were other sites nationwide, but these were the ones I'm familiar with, were local to me, and people got sick, all because of masks. And so if you're dealing with an actual respiratory hazard and you're an employer, what do you need to do if you're an employer? Distribute your employees NIOSH rated mask. Again, the Centers of Disease Control, they're certified NIOSH, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. They need a medical evaluation, they need training, you need a supplied air respirator, and protect you from a specific thing, and you're also gonna need fit testing with. If you're dealing with a mask, not NIOSH rated, you don't need to do anything. And masks don't supply air either. They may not. Because people are confused, you might see people using masks and then with COVID, right?
respirators post COVID right now. My opinion. So now let's say that you are a government official here, and you're with this. This is what we were told to wear during COVID. If you go back to, and I have the article here. I'm going to stop sharing it here. I have the article. This is from Scientific American, 2011. In future such disasters, strapping on a respirator may be among the most important safety precautions people can take. In the future, we need to make sure people who are going into harm's way have respiratory protection of some degree that allows them to move freely enough to rescue people. This is according to the article, quotes someone named Leo. Today, more than 12,911, this is 10 years ago, workers continue to have trouble breathing, according to a study conducted by the World Trade Center Mental Monitoring Program, published April 8th, 2010, in the New England Journal of Medicine. Now, this is for rescue workers, right? What about for us? Respiratory protection. COVID hit. This is 10 years, 11, 10 years before COVID hit. Respiratory protection we didn't have. So it's incumbent on us to get it. Let's say you're a private employer. It'd be advisable to get respirators. Train your people on respirators, depending on what it is. The reason why they recommended masks was now you don't have to do any of that stuff. And if you're going to be a responder, you got to have in your head, hey, what am I responding to? What am I going to do? What respirators should I have and everything else? And I'll go into that in a minute. By the way, if this is Safety FM, we're going to be we'll try to stop you go catch the podcast and on YouTube, whatever video platform. All this stuff is important out there. Get the right training, get the right equipment. Again, assess, analyze, and act. Let's share again. And so here we have the mask, right? And the biggest problem that we're going to have now, I can see this happening during the next disaster. People wearing the mask rather than respirators because the masks are protecting you from the most deadly ever exist. So when do you use this? PPE need for a particular job, and you have to anticipate what you're doing. When do you need to use respirators and everything else along with that medical clearance? Full face respirators are required with chemical hazards to the face and the eye. All mask respirators cause physical stress on the body. To have a medical evaluation, employer or supervisors might be held liable if there's a problem, except if you're the government. Let's have sovereign immunity. Let's remember, during 9/11 and subsequent disasters, OSHA was suspended. OSHA went from a compliance into a consultation role on all these. Oh, no OSHA regulation. So what happens? They weren't enforcing them and things. But is the employer still responsible for injuries? Absolutely. Absolutely responsible. Absolutely responsible for liable for injury. So just because you're not none of this stuff is applying to you doesn't mean OSHA's not goes into consultation road does well, doesn't mean you're exempt from all law. That's not what that means. So if you're in charge of safety and for especially for a private company, you better make sure that you get the right stuff when you get it. If you have this respirator, does not supply respirator oxygen. We have P100 cartridges on here. Sometimes DEL, whatever your maximum use has, will go in. You want you will go in higher rate, right, from full training. Then you have the NPR respirators. Does not supply oxygen, does not work for gases, 10 times the PEL going on there. Must be fit tested, qualitative, only fit testing, usually.
Must have medical approval, certified, and ideally here. N is no oil, P is oil proof, R is resistant to oil. They have 95% of particles 0.3 microns or greater, 99% of particles, 99 means 0.3 microns or greater, or 100%, or P100, N100, R100, mean 99.97% of particles, 0.3 microns or greater in diameter on here. So it might filter smaller particles, right? Yeah, or may not, but that's what it's rated for. And then you have the full face respirator here, which is 5 times better than the half face. All the same things on there. Powered air purifying, supplied air. This is typically what firefighters will use, a slightly different. This is an older photo. And then you have this is an abrasive blaster. Here, one of our listeners sent this in. I said, "Hey, I need an abrasive blast." Oh, this is what I got. And you that all is on supplied air, different ways of doing this from a bottle or compressor. So let's say that you go into a situation. Yeah, this is from the DOT guide, the emergency response guide. What are you looking for? How do you know you have chemical hazards? And then there might be a chemical issue. Dead animals, birds or fish, lack of insects, odor, mass casualties, pattern of casualties, unusual liquid droplets, different looking areas, low lying clouds, unusual metal debris, or debris, my mother would say. And you have all this stuff out there. Now, I'm not going to hang around. I'm leaving it. I'm not worried about respirators. That's what that makes me laugh. I'm carrying around this respirator. Guess what? It's going to take you longer to take that respirator around and put it on than it is going to tell you to run like hell away from the hazard. And you know you have a biological hazard. Biological unusual numbers of sick or dying people, animals, unscheduled and unusual spray being disseminated, abandoned spray devices. We're talking the Hudson sprayers and the odd radiological. We had the fin symbol there, the little propeller, containers with the radiation symbol, unusual metal debris, heat emitting material, glowing material, sick people or animal. Again, I would get the hell out. And if you're going to make an emergency call on that, do it 100 meters away from the site because they're worried about things being detonated by a cell phone. And again, for if you're a emergency responder, this is everything here. Now, this goes to show you, don't bring it home. This is what I saw on 9/11. People were in Lower Manhattan. They were either being evacuated by people like my uncle, or they went on foot. So a lot the girls that lived next door to me were they walked from Manhattan to the George Washington Bridge. This is roughly 10 miles. It's a nice walk. I've done it, by the way. But now you're all full of this stuff, caustic material. They get into vehicles, buses, pickup trucks, whatever, vans. They get taken across the bridge, and they have to walk from the George Washington Bridge down to Hoboken, Bergen, Hudson County. Nightmarish situation out there. They get home. A lot of them are still covered in dust. Now what do? They go in their house. They spread all this stuff in their house and their apartment. And this is part of the public record. You have, I mentioned on Coast to Coast AM earlier this year, the input it. You had this situation where you bring this stuff into the house. Now, say what's safe and what's not safe. That's a problem. What's safe? What's not safe? What's I don't know. And with the anthrax cleanups, what did we end up doing? This is out, by the way, on the public record. So I'm not releasing confidential. And what ended up happening is we ended up throwing everything out because nobody would sign off on that. Who's going to want to sign off on that? Not too many people. So again, when you come, don't bring the stuff with you. Maybe have plan to have a garden hose out back where you could decon if there's nothing else available. Let's say you have a mass casualty event. It is in a lot of protocols, they actually hose you down with a fire hose, right? With that, go back to our powerful. So notify your local police, limit access. So let's say that I had inside, I was inside a building. This happened. I would direct people to the bathroom. Hang out in the bathroom. Why? Easy to decontaminate and easy to remodel. You don't want to have the person running all over the place with that. And if that's, let's say, in a building with hazmat, don't rely on your nose. Just because you can't smell it does not mean that it's not a hazard. And you can't plan for unforeseen events, but you can plan for what we've learned from before. And this is what we do. Again, what happened on 9/11 and how do we prevent it from happening again? If it does happen, left and right on the bang, if we recall, what are we going to do about it? Have your plans in place. Have those emergency action plans for your work in place. And I don't want to talk about COVID. Right? But don't get it in you. Don't get it on you. Don't bring it home. That's your final reminder. And remember that disaster management cycle. Right now, we're still in the mitigation phase in a lot of these places. These recent disasters, we need to be in the preparation and going out there and doing it, right? Preparing for the next disaster. That's why we have disaster preparation month every September. And this month, we are dealing with, uh, this year, we are dealing with older folk and disasters. So I know this was rambling a little bit. I know what else is there. Uh, really important that we learn our lessons here from 9/11. Want to prevent it from happening again, which we're still putting in security protocols related to 9/11, believe it or not, 22 years later. Uh, what's your family going to do? We're talking about this all month here on disaster preparation. So for Safety Wars and Safety FM, this is Jim Pulsel. I hope you're in my thoughts on 9/11. Uh, we'll on in our prayers. So we said prayers at our church for the victims of 9/11 and everything with that, the ongoing things. And don't forget PTSD, psychological issues. If you're still having issues, I know I have. I had a nightmare last night over this stuff. I still deal with a little bit of PTSD from this, and I wasn't even directly involved in this. I just witnessed this on TV from my rooftop, like everybody else. I got involved in some cleanups and things of that nature. But dealing with this directly has been a horrible situation, and give people a break. A couple years ago, we had an accident investigation that my company was involved in, a rather serious one, where a person had lost someone on 9/11 and they had at work and got hurt at work, not paying attention to what he was doing, right? Context drives behavior. I'm not victim shaming here, but probably should have taken the day off because his mind wasn't exactly where it was, and clear should have had a little bit more empathy with this. I know a lot of employers still give people the day off for today in this area. So again, go out there, be kind to each other. But let's remember one other thing. Let me our parting comment on here. I keep sending this. We had September 11th. We also had September 12th, where we were all unified. We had Congress people singing "God Bless America" on the steps of Congress. Bipartisan, people getting along. That's what we need to get back to. We need to get along. We need to work together. We need to have leadership, right? And that's what else. Thanks for listening. See you tomorrow.
The views and opinions Opinions expressed on this podcast are those of the host and its guest and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of the company. Examples of analysis discussed within this podcast are only examples. They should not be utilized in the real world as the only solution available, as they are based only on very limited and dated open source information. Assumptions made within this analysis are not reflective of the position of the company. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, stored in a retrieval system, or transmitted in any form or by any means, mechanical, electronic, recording, or otherwise, without prior written permission of the creator of the podcast, Jay Allen.
You got into the safety business because you wanted to protect people, but somewhere along the way, the job started controlling your time, your schedule, your priorities, even your income potential. What if the expertise you've built over the years in the field can give you something more? More freedom, more control, more ownership of your future. I'm Sheldon Primus, the author of 7 Steps to Starting a Profitable Safety Consulting Business and the host of the Safety Consultant Podcast, with more than 350 episodes helping safety professionals become consultants and grow their career. Consulting changed my life. In fact, I'm a full-time RVer, and one consulting contract paid for my home I live in today. Now, I help safety professionals build their own consulting practice through bi-weekly coaching calls, accountability, and personal guidance. But this program isn't for everyone. Start with the Consultant Readiness Audit at sheldon.coach.
What if everything we thought we knew about safety was just interference? From the host of the Rated R Safety Show and the founder of Safety FM comes the complete signal transmission trilogy, now available in one powerful edition. Safety, in my opinion, the book that started the conversation. Safety Mutation, where the boundaries of culture, systems, and belief begin to break. And now, Safety Transmission, the final piece of the signal. For the first time, all 3 books are together in one volume. The Signal Transmission Trilogy, Complete Edition. This isn't just about compliance. It's about consciousness. It's about decoding the way we think, lead, and live, inside and outside the system. Whether you've been following the signal since the beginning or you're just now tuning in, this is the version to own. Search Signal Trilogy on Amazon or visit safetyfm.com to get your copy now.